But we have to answer the question, just who is Ken Shamrock? Strap yourself in for this one, folks. I got quite the fucking history to go through. Born in Robbins Air Force Base in Warner Robins, Georgia, Kenneth Wayne Kilpatrick, as he was named, experienced a bit of hardship in his early life. After being kicked out of his house by his stepfather at age 13 after a stint in juvenile detention, Ken took to living in cars until he became a ward of the state. He eventually landed at Bob Shamrock's boys' home in Susanville, California at the age of 14. Bob Shamrock would later adopt Ken. An athlete in wrestling and football through high school and college, Shamrock forewent a chance at a football career, passing up a tryout with the San Diego Chargers to instead take a shot at pro wrestling. He debuted using the name Wayne Shamrock for Atlantic Coast Wrestling in 1990 before moving to South Atlantic Pro Wrestling, where he used the name Vince Torelli. While there, he would have notable bouts against Dean Malenko, the Man of 1,000 Holds, and also the Nasty Boys. During this time, Shamrock also trekked over to Japan, where he would fight in Universal Wrestling Federation, the UWF, and Fujiwara Gumi, where in 1992, under Wayne Shamrock, he took part in a supposedly real shoot fight against a kickboxer in which Shamrock submitted his opponent in 44 seconds. After this bout, Ken, along with Masakazu Funaki and Minoru Suzuki, decided that real fighting could be successful in Japan, and thus the men went off and formed a promotion called Pancrase. Pancrase would adopt some pro wrestling rules, such as no closed fist punches and also the use of rope breaks, but otherwise was legitimate fighting. In 1994, Pancrase held its first ever 16-man King of Pancrase tournament, which Shamrock would win after victories against Maury Smith, Alex Cook, Manabu Yamada, and Masakazu Funaki to be crowned the first ever King of Pancrase. Shamrock would later defend his King title against Boss Rutten in 1995, submitting Boss via knee bar. Shamrock would later have a falling out with Pancrase in 1996. Shamrock's record in Pancrase, by the way, was 17-3. While all this was going down, Ken also found time to compete in the brand new no-holds-barred promotion called the UFC. At UFC 1, held in November 12, 1993, Shamrock first took on Patrick Smith, a Taekwondo fighter whom Shamrock made short work of with a heel hook. His second bout that evening would be against Hoist Gracie. Gracie would choke Shamrock out at only 57 seconds. In September of 1994, Shamrock returned to the UFC for UFC 3, where he would first defeat Christoph Lininger and Felix Mitchell, but Shamrock was unable to finish the tournament due to injury. At UFC 5 on April 5th, 1995, Shamrock once again faced off against Hoist Gracie, this time for the UFC Superfight Championship. The two men would fight for 36 minutes straight to a draw. Then at UFC 6 in July 1995, Shamrock would fight Dan the Beast Severn for the Superfight Championship, where he was able to choke the Beast out at little over 2 minutes. At UFC 7, held on September 7, 1995, Shamrock defended his title against Oleg Taktarov, and the men fought for 33 minutes. The fight was declared a draw because apparently UFC didn't have any judges on hand. At UFC 8 in February 96, famed meth head and Jesus disciple Kimo fought Shamrock for the Super Fight title. Shamrock would knee bar old Kimo after 4 minutes. At UFC 9 in May of 96, one of the most notorious fights in UFC history happened, the dance in Detroit. And a story too long to tell in condensed time. Just know this, the UFC was forced at the time in Detroit to implement special rules for the event, including no closed fist punches and no headbutts. Dan Severn was Shamrock's opponent, and the men put on a snooze fest for 30 minutes. At the end, Severn eked out a split decision and took away Ken's belt. Ken's UFC run in the 90s would end at Ultimate 1996, held on December 7th in 96 in Birmingham, Alabama. And Brian Johnston, the man who was coaching Fujita here tonight, was submitted by Ken via forearm choke at 5 minutes and 48 seconds of the first round. Johnston is also notable for having lost to the Pedro Pedro Octavio at a Vale Tudo event, but also lost to Kimo at an event called Ultimate Explosion.
Ultimate Explosion.
Ultimate Explosion.
Sounds like me in the bedroom.
I highly doubt that. After the UFC, Shamrock, of course, had a stint in the WWF during its white-hot Attitude Era, which was from 97 to 99. And that brings us here, finally, to Pride 2000 Grand Prix Finals.
Jesus, just do a separate episode about Ken Shamrock's history.
Oh my God, it is, yes.